You've been putting on operas in Toronto for almost a decade now, so what have you learned at the helm of the COC? What have been your biggest challenges?
I don't know. I don't look at them as challenges. I look at them as problems to be solved. I think we have an incredible opera community here. I think the audience is extremely curious and they're ready to discuss. I think they don't judge it before they've seen it, which I find really important and refreshing. And I think they're ready to go a long way. And I think they also try really hard to follow us and understand why we do what we do. Then, sometimes you succeed more or less, depending on what it is and depending on what the setup of that audience that very night is. I think it's also, you can't treat the audience as the audience.
Okay.
I always say there's 2,000 audiences every night. Because everyone will walk out of that show with a slightly different idea of what it was. And
all right.
so in a way, I think it's very hard you don't want to do it against or without the audience, but you cannot really do it for them either. I think it's more about putting out a strong proposal, and yet it's only a proposal. I think there's there's a lot of wrong ways of doing things, but I think there's not one right way. But I think we need to stand behind it and say that is what our Don Giovanni is, or that is what our Traviata is. That doesn't mean that it's the truth about Don Giovanni or Traviata. It's just one of the many possibilities of doing it. And I think that's important for the audience to know, that you come back a couple of years later, it's a different production. It might be completely different. It might lead you down a completely different way. But I believe it's all in piece. Or it's all in pieces. It's the pieces that allow us to have those opportunities. And we still perform them because they're multi-layered and they actually allow us to do this with them.
Right.
When you look at, we were very lucky that today we have access to 400 years of works. And most of the ones that we perform today are the masterpieces that have it's very Darwinist in a way. It's the survival of the best. And they don't only survive because of the pretty music, I think they survive because they also have a strong story to tell.
Right.
When you look at how many of Mozart's contemporaries we still perform, not so many. How many of Verdi's contemporaries we still perform, not so many. I think people like Mozart and Verdi were a real problem for their fellow composers in their own time, because they were so, not only one head, but several feet above what other people are able to do. And that's why we still find interest in those works today.
So, obviously you need to stand by your various productions, but is there anything you wish you had done differently since coming to Toronto and within your work at the opera company?
I always do that with my team when we're done with the run. We always talk about what worked and what didn't, and what would we do differently next time. Absolutely, but that's part of the process. But it's also part of the process that I've just asked. You're never done. Like if I ever felt I was done with a piece, I would not program it anymore. And that's an individual thing, because other people might still not be done with it. So, there's probably something in every production that sometimes it can be music related, sometimes it can be staging related, but it's not a bad thing. The people who trained me in opera, they trained me to always strive for the best possible, outcome, or best possible goal that you could reach. But in a way, this can only work if you set a new goal shortly before you've reached your goal. Otherwise, it's not a fulfilling process, and I think you have to kind of grow with your own standards.
Right. I'll pretend you answered the question.
Thank you.
There's nothing in particular that you can reflect on that you wish you did differently?
No, not in terms of putting on the shows. Obviously when I came here, my first 2 seasons were partly prepared, so there's only so much jurisdiction that I had over those. But ever since we've done the programming that I was responsible for, I feel pretty good about it. And that doesn't mean I would do it exactly the same. But it was, I think we've done okay.
I think you've
This
done
place-
okay too.
Yeah.